I have 1:15. I was just thinking about the fact that this could be our last class meeting because a week from now we'll have had the test already, right? There won't be any reason to meet at 1:15, probably, unless you really want to. Paige, do you really want to?
I thought you were taking us all to lunch.
Hey, you know what? I would spring for pizza or something like that. We could do something like that.
That sounds really fun. I
Yeah.
would pitch in for that.
Let's do it.
Want to do that?
If I'm
But
taking,
we're not allowed to eat in the bio lab.
Well, let's think about that. Yeah, I like that idea. Who has the best pizza in town? Anybody have an opinion? No? I don't get pizza from Olean, so I don't know.
I'll ask Kirei. She's a pizza fanatic.
Okay, why don't you ask her?
Yeah.
And then either we could have it delivered or somebody could run out and get it. And I mean, there's only like 12 of us, I think, in the class, something like that. So, you know, whatever size, get a couple of pizzas. Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to do something like that. That'd be fun. Maybe get some, I don't know, what kind of, you guys drink Diet Pepsi, regular?
I'm good
Sure.
with just water.
Yeah.
You're good with just water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, let's investigate that. I think that's a nice idea.
We gotta invite John.
Absolutely.
No, we have to send a spite photo to John.
No, we should do that. We should invite John and Jolene, and we'll just send an email out to the whole class. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a great idea.
That'll be
Tell him to
good.
show up.
Let's do that.
Wait, we shouldn't even tell them there's a pizza party. Just say it's mandatory. You have to show up for a meeting with you, and then we'll surprise them. I think that's
That would be funny.
They're gonna get freaked out if I say it's a mandatory meeting. John's gonna get freaked out.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So would Jolene, but it'd be funny. It'd be a nice little surprise.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you want to chat about? What do you want to go over?
Just next week's test.
Okay. I got so much I'm taking home in my briefcase here. I gotta pull out the syllabus. So basically the test is going to be over the last two chapters. So that's cardiovascular and lymphatic. I would say probably, given the fact that we devoted gosh, almost, well, I guess about a week and a half, just time-wise, to both chapters. There's probably going to be about the same amount of points, you know, for each chapter, maybe a little more skewed toward cardiovascular, but not a whole lot. Let me pull up the PowerPoints. Now we did talk a little bit about cardiovascular chapter in the review the last few weeks. And I guess I would recommend that you try to look at those Zoom recordings. Now, I do understand that for cardiovascular, oh, where is it here? there are quite a few recordings.
I think since nobody showed up today, you should give us like an extra credit question in this Zoom that's like weird, so to see who comes back and watches them.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so maybe I could ask about what is angioplasty and stenting.
There you
How
go.
about that? There'll be a reward for religiously coming to class. Okay, so there's a short little video on that. You all know what I'm talking about? Go into the court shell where all the recordings are, and in chapter 15, it's got a little YouTube video. Again, it lasts about a minute or two. It's not very long. But I was going to say, these recordings that I did, there's 4 of them, so it's a long chapter. It just is. But I would watch those. This particular video, and you guys see what I'm pointing out, right? Yeah, this is one that I downloaded last spring that I found that I thought was really, really excellent from a different community college. Obviously, this is down in New Mexico or Arizona, I would imagine. Maybe Texas, I'm not sure. And it's a long video. It's pretty long, but it was really good. And I thought, well, just to have another video that people might want to watch that explains it differently than I would. It's there. I don't know if anybody's ever watched it. I would hope. And then here's something more on specifically ECG and cardiac induction, which we talked about in here, I think last week ago, last Tuesday, recently anyway. And then I think Freya had said she really liked this video where they compared and contrasted the model and the sheep part and all that good sort of stuff. So anyway, that really would be helpful, I think, to watch those 4 recordings. And then in the lymphatic chapter, which a lot of you haven't gotten to yet, I assume, right, Sadie? Did you get to it yet? Today, you're going to start today.
Yeah.
There's three videos. Now I'll just warn you, you can do the math here. These are probably a good over an hour each. So it's really it's a technical chapter. It's interesting, but it's not an easy chapter. All right, so let me go right into the PowerPoints.
Myve just hopped on. We have to tell her about the extra credit question.
Okay.
Myve, since nobody is on today, he told us he's going to do a question next week on angioplasty and stenting.
For chapter 16.
No, it's
15.
in 15. So Myve, if you go into the course shell, and I'll just show you this. Oh, come on. What's going on? So if you go to the content section and then go to Zoom meeting recordings and lecture recordings. and then down to cardiovascular system. There's a short little video right here on angioplasty and stenting. So watch that. Okay.
So this video for the extra credits for next exam coming up?
Yes.
Okay.
It also has the 4 recordings that I did on cardiovascular, which I suggest you watch too. So I did pull up the cardiovascular system PowerPoint, which I think you guys see, right? We had talked the other day, I think, about the cardiac conduction pathway, right? We've already talked about the anatomy of the heart before we did the deer heart dissection a couple weeks ago. So you have gotten into this chapter actually already. And I would hope by now you've gotten through a big chunk of this chapter. Are there any topics you'd like to ask about that are not making sense? We've got about an hour. Go ahead, Paige.
Since we had an EKG question and a blood pressure question on today's exam, can we expect that again next week? I know they're like it's lab and lecture, but
yeah, nothing on blood pressure because we didn't really talk much about that at all in the cardiovascular chapter. I don't think. Maybe I did make a comment on it, but EKG and cardiac induction pathway, I think that could rear its ugly head again, possibly. So I think that's important stuff. So I wouldn't say you would not see that again. I'm not saying an essay necessarily, but there could be a question on, the T wave of an ECG represents blank. And then I have depolarization of atria, repolarization of atria, depolarization of ventricles, repolarization of ventricles, a multiple choice type of question. There is a bit of overlap between lecture and lab, in that particular example. In many respects, we've kind of had them separate over the last, 14 weeks or so. But here's an exception to the rule where there is some overlap. So where are you guys in cardiovascular system? Are you having, I hope you've gotten into it. I hope you've started this chapter. I know, you should have.
I don't know, like what I've done so far, I've like been pretty good on. So I guess I can't really ask questions about like what I don't know yet.
Sure. No, that's fair. But then you can say the same thing for lymphatic, right? Because you haven't gotten into it yet. And I understand. Believe me, I'm not trying to be critical or criticize anybody because I get you're busy and everything. But I wish, maybe just because the way that the semester sort of schedule went, I wish we'd have a chance to talk about some of these topics because I think there's some challenging topics here. And if you want, I can just dive into some stuff that I think, might be generally confusing to most students. But I'd like you to have an opportunity to ask questions before I do that.
I guess just go into like what will be on the test.
Well, it's like I can't cover everything. It's just that's why you've got 4 hours of videos in the chapter 15 to look at, and just to go over it very quickly, I don't know that accomplishes much other than overwhelms you and like, oh my God, I got to learn all this.
So for me, what I'm struggling the most with is kind of like, I need to watch some more of those like videos that you linked in there on like just kind of like relating like the EKG things with the electrical impulses, and then just kind of trying to understand what part of the heartbeat is each section and stuff like that. So like just like the timing of the heartbeat and being able to read that on the EKG and stuff like that.
Okay. I forget, Paige, were you here when we talked about this in, wasn't it review? Didn't I go over this in review?
Yeah, you went over it last week in this same class. I asked last week too.
It's still
So
not,
I just,
no, that's
yeah,
okay.
I just
That's
need
okay.
to watch, like, you know, if I can, I think there's some like heart cycle videos in Blackboard that I need to look at. Just like, if I can find one that really like slows it down and shows, you know, the different impulses, I think I'll get it. But that's the only thing. Everything else I felt was pretty, you know, we've done a good job of building up to this chapter. So
Let me try something here once. Let me see if I can pull up a video here. Oh, where is it?
you might have to unshare your screen and do it again, because at worst, I don't know if what you guys see, but I was stuck on Sadie's face for that one video.
Okay, I'm just trying to think about where do I go to find this video that I'm wanting to show you? For some reason that hyperlink is not working. So I'm going to a website here of the textbook that maybe I can show it to you here. Just give me a second to get in. This is chapter 15. There's a video called The Cardiac Conduction Pathway. There are no animations. Try plan B. As I may have told you, the publisher has now taken what they used to give for part of your price of the book, and they're wanting to charge you for all this now extra, which is baloney. This makes me mad. All right, let me see if this will play. Will this play? Okay.
Action potentials are action potentials are
So I'm going to share my screen here, maybe. Let's watch this video if I can get it to run.
And Freya should be here in a second. She left her computer at the school, so she's just pulling in now.
Oh, all right. Do you see the video coming up?
originate in the
Yes? You don't.
I see some of your computer files.
Oh, try this again here. Share screen. How about now?
There we go.
Okay, this is super short, and I don't know if it's going to be helpful, but we're going to play it anyway. You turn up the volume so you can hear it.
The sinoatrial node and travel across the wall of the atrium from the action potentials originate in the sinoatrial node and travel across the wall of the atrium from the sinoatrial node to the atrioventricular node. Action potentials pass slowly through the atrioventricular node to give the atria time to contract. They then pass rapidly along the atrioventricular bundle which extends from the atrioventricular node through the fibrous skeleton into the interventricular septum. The atrioventricular bundle divides into right and left bundle branches, and action potentials descend rapidly to the apex of each ventricle along the bundle branches. Action potentials are carried by the Purkinje fibers from the bundle branches to the ventricular walls. The rapid conduction from the atrioventricular bundle to the ends of the Purkinje fibers allows the ventricular muscle cells to contract in unison, providing a strong contraction.
So Paige, did that help, Paige, kind of give you a sense of how the activity, the cardiac conduction pathways kind of jived with the actual mechanical effect, which is the contraction and relaxation of these different chambers?
Yeah, so basically, like if you were to look at that on like an ECG or an EKG,
Mhm.
you would see the, spike, and then the contraction would happen right after that. 'Cause
Yeah,
that's measured. Okay.
yeah. So the P wave, right after the P wave that you would
Mhm.
in the ECG, that would result almost instantaneously, but just a couple milliseconds after that, with the contraction of the atria, right?
Okay.
And the QRS complex, is both depolarization of the ventricles and repolarization of the atria.
Okay.
And so after that occurs on the ECG, the ventricles are going to contract and the atria are going to do what?
Relax.
Right.
Oh.
Exactly right. And then the T wave, of course, represents a repolarization of the ventricles, which leads immediately to relaxation of the ventricles. And then we start all over again for the next heartbeat.
Okay. Yeah. No, that was really helpful. Thank you.
I'll play it one more time. It's only like a minute long.
Okay.
Potentials originate in the action potentials originate in the sinoatrial node and travel across the wall of the atrium from the sinoatrial node to the atrioventricular node. Action potentials pass slowly through the atrioventricular node to give the atria time to contract. They then pass rapidly along the atrioventricular bundle, which extends from the atrioventricular node through the fibrous skeleton into the interventricular septum. The atrioventricular bundle divides into right and left bundle branches, and action potentials descend rapidly to the apex of each ventricle along the bundle branches. Action potentials are carried by the Purkinje fibers from the bundle branches to the ventricular walls. The rapid conduction from the atrioventricular bundle to the ends of the Purkinje fibers allows the ventricular muscle cells to contract in unison, providing a strong contraction.
So that was the video that I had tried to hyperlink within the core shell. And I don't understand why it did not play. The other thing that I was going to tell you guys you could do, if you go to the core shell, there may be a supplemental PowerPoint. I'm trying to remember if I posted that here, that had videos in it. I'm just pulling it up here and see if I can find it. I just cannot recall. I just think videos are really helpful to have if we can incorporate those. So there's the PowerPoint. Let's see if it's got the videos in it. It's a big file. It's taking a while to load. How about other questions specific to cardiovascular system? What I'm loading is again, those supplemental ancillary videos or so, animations, I guess they call them. Do you see the course shell now, the PowerPoints by chapter?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm trying to load here is this PowerPoint called cardiovascular system animations, and this one called lymphatic system and immunity animations. And they're so big. They're just taking their sweet old time to load here. I'm hopeful, given how slow it's taking, that they're going to be there. And so that video that I just showed you that I tried to embed that didn't come up when I clicked on it should be in the supplemental PowerPoint. Okay.
And so for next week, because we kind of covered like the names of the different veins and arteries today in lab, that we're talking more like the technical side of the cardiac cycle and stuff for next week, right? Not so much the anatomy of like the names of the blood vessels and such.
Exactly. When you get to the very last of the fourth module, if you will, of chapter 15, the Zoom that I recorded, it's going to end. It's going to end with section 15.6 arterial system on 593. So in essence, we're going to get through the first 5 sections of the chapter, and then the remaining, I don't know how many there are, 3 or 4 sections, they go into specific blood vessels of the legs, the arms, the torso, what we talked about in whatever exercise that was in the lab. Yeah, you don't have to worry about anything like from 593 to the end of the chapter.
Okay, so that was,
Okay.
what was the last one you said that was on module 4, 15 what?
Section 15.5 is entitled Paths of Circulation,
Okay,
and they basically review systemic and pulmonary circulation. And it's a very, very short section. There's like, I don't know, not even a page.
okay,
So where it starts here, arterial system is where it gets into specifics of blood vessels, which you don't need to know for the lecture exam.
Yeah, right on like the first page of the chapter, it goes like 15.1 through 15.8. So I don't know if Freya, you wanted to make a note on like the first page, it like shows you like 15.1, 15.2. Just want to like do a little line to say like stop at 15.5.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, as you can see, I found my computer. I drove all the way back to Bradford.
Oh, why these are not playing? Why aren't these playing? All right, I'm wasting our time. How about other questions? Things you'd like to go over, topics. We can talk about lymphatic too, chapter 16 if you wish.
Yeah, I don't really have any other questions from the cardiovascular, so I guess we can just start going over lymphatic.
So anything on 15 before we go on to 16? Okay.
Lymphatic vessels recycle excess tissue fluid that accumulates.
I'm just seeing if these, okay. So let me begin by, again, sharing my screen and telling you that one supplemental PowerPoint for chapter 16, do you see that on your screen? I can't see you, so you gotta say yes or no.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay. So here there are, I guess, 11, no, 10 videos. many of these I've tried to embed within the chapter 16 PowerPoint. Not every one, because I didn't use all of them, but if you ever have trouble playing the video, I would go next to this supplemental PowerPoint, because this one will talk about, for example, phagocytosis. This talks about interferon, the inflammatory response, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to make you aware that these appear to be functional, these videos, these animations. So while they're hopefully embedded within the PowerPoint, if they don't run for you, check out the supplemental PowerPoint that includes the animations.
And the supplemental PowerPoint, those are in
In the course shell, go into
where like stuff to bring to lab? That one?
No, that's for lab. We're
Okay.
talking lecture now. So I will stop sharing. Let me quickly show you. Okay, so Freya, here's the content section of our course shell. Do you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so if you go to PowerPoints by chapter,
Right.
okay, and then scroll down to the very bottom, here you'll see cardiovascular system. Here's lymphatic.
Right.
I tried to load this cardiovascular animations. It wasn't working for me. This one did load,
Okay. Okay.
and
I got
that's the supplemental 10 or so animations.
you. Oh,
That,
it says right there. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
sure. Okay, so let me pull up the chapter 16 PowerPoint, but I would recommend you watch the Zoom lecture recordings, right, for 16. Okay, so here comes the PowerPoint. Again, this is covering a lot of topics, a lot of territory. Has anybody gotten into this chapter at all? Let me just ask that question. Oh, Freya, you have. Okay, good. Anybody else? Not yet. Okay. For Tuesday, when we have our last review, I really would love it if you could get into that chapter so that when we meet, we can, spend that time on 16. I think that would be the best thing to do. So Freya, you've gotten into it a little bit. How far did you get into the chapter? Third of the way, fourth of the way, halfway?
I'd say probably about a quarter.
Okay.
Like on the papers, the questions and stuff, I always fill those out too, and then make note cards. I'm on like lymph node before it goes into lymph
Okay.
nodes.
Yeah, great. All right. All right. So let's just maybe talk a little bit about the lymphatic system. And I'm going to just kind of bounce around here because I know we have limited time. I won't try to get through all this chapter in 45 minutes. It's going to be impossible to do that, but I can at least get into some of the stuff. So this slide simply lists the major functions of this system. While we tend to focus on the defense immune aspect, there are a couple other functions which I list here, and I talk a little bit, not much, just a little bit about lipid absorption. You'll be hearing more about that if you take ANP2 and study the digestive system. There you'll hear a little bit more about things called lacteals in the villi of the small intestine. You might remember us looking at the simple columnar of the villi many months ago when we did histology. Do you remember that? I had the model, that kind of funny looking model with the orange hills on it, if you will, peaks. Do you remember that model? Anyway, inside each of those villi are structures called lacteals, and they're part of the lymphatic system, and it's here that important lipids get absorbed. Fluid balance. This gets at the idea that there is always fluid circulating between the cells of your tissues. And that fluid ultimately comes from the blood. Now, I'm not saying blood cells dump out into the tissues. We know that the blood gets into the tissues via blood vessels, but there's fluid that leaks out of the blood vessels normally. And it's what helps to bathe the cells in what's called extracellular or interstitial fluid. And that fluid, if it's not reabsorbed back into the lymphatic system, and then ultimately back into the blood plasma, that can cause edema. Do you know what edema is? You've heard of the term edema?
Basically
Swelling.
filling up a fluid, right?
Yeah, swelling, right, exactly. Right. Okay, so now you see the slide with the 3 functions, right? Yes?
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought I had it shared and I wasn't sharing it, was I, earlier? Okay, so this is an important slide that just addresses the 3 major functions. And function number 1 and function number 3 are what this chapter really spends some time on. And I would say more on 3 even than 1, although 1 is important and is introduced early in the chapter. There's just a cursory comment about its role in absorbing special lipids in the small intestine. All right, so back to the idea of fluid balance. So here we see the heart and the circulatory system, right? Here you see the pulmonary circuit. Here's the systemic circuit. I hope you understand when I talk about those 2 circuits what I'm talking about. Pulmonary is blood flow to and from the lungs, right? From the heart to the lungs and back. Systemic is from the heart to the rest of the body and back, right? You all know that. And what do we have here? Well, we have an artery. What do we have here? We have arterioles. What do we have here? We have capillaries. What do we have here? We have venules. What do we have here? We have veins. Remember us describing the major blood vessels? I drew a picture on the whiteboard last week or this week, whatever week it was, I forget. Okay. So what this is saying is that when this interstitial extracellular fluid, which arises from the circulatory system, okay, so this is fluid that's moving out of the capillaries. This is normal, okay? That has to be reabsorbed back into the lymphatic system through what are called lymphatic capillaries. So we have blood capillaries that contain blood, right? And we have lymphatic capillaries that contain a fluid called lymph, L-Y-M-P-H, lymph. Its majority of lymph is made of water, but there are dissolved chemicals in lymph as well. And there can even be pathogens in lymph. Does anybody know what I mean by a pathogen? Can you give me an example of a pathogen?
Like a bacteria. or
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah, bacteria are pathogens. Viruses can become pathogens. We're in the middle of an epidemic, COVID-19 virus, right? So viruses can cause illness and disease. Bacteria can. We would even define cancer cells as not maybe pathogens, but they are troublesome. They are viewed by the immune system as being something that needs to be neutralized and destroyed, if it can do that. Sometimes people can acquire parasitic infections. You've all heard of malaria. Have you ever heard of giardiasis or giardia? African sleeping sickness is due to a little single-celled trypanosome that's transmitted when you get bitten by a tsetse fly. So there's all sorts of parasitic infections that involve these parasitic cells. Well, they can sometimes even get into this lymphatic pathway, if you will. So these lymph capillaries really pretty much absorb this extracellular fluid, and then this lymph is passed through lymph nodes in a unidirectional way. Okay, there's only one direction that this lymph moves. It's from the capillaries into bigger lymphatic vessels and through lymph nodes. And in the lymph nodes is where we have white blood cells that are monitoring the lymph of pathogens. White blood cells are there, of course, to phagocytize a bacterium. And I hope you know what I mean by phagocytize, right? You all know what I mean by that? To engulf it, right? And eventually this lymph makes its way back into the blood plasma. Okay, that's what that's showing here. And then eventually some of that fluid may eventually, be formed into interstitial fluid once it leaves the blood and get picked up by the lymph capillaries again, and then it just gets recirculated. So your lymphatic system, one important function of it is to filter lymph of pathogens, but it's also to maintain fluid balance. And if for whatever reason you remove lymph nodes or lymph capillaries, this excess tissue fluid has nowhere to go but to accumulate, and that's what we call edema or swelling. For example, if a woman has breast cancer and she has her axillary lymph nodes removed, okay, biopsy to see if the cancer spread, and they remove some of those lymph nodes, then she is at a higher risk of having edema in that associated arm because the excess fluid can't be recirculated like it normally would. So if she's, my mom had breast cancer, so I know a lot about this, unfortunately. She had to be very careful when she took a pan of cookies out of the oven that she didn't burn her hand, because if she were to have gotten a burn or an injury, that would have really exacerbated the swelling and the edema in that particular appendage, because she didn't have the lymph nodes and the lymph capillaries to reabsorb that lymph normally, Or you see somebody who has edema in their legs. If they're having problems with heart function, they can sometimes cause the legs to swell. It's a complicated thing, but you all know what I mean by edema, I think, right? Okay, let me reshare again. So that's a real important concept that's introduced early in this chapter 16, the role that the lymphatic system plays in fluid reabsorption in this system called the lymphatic system. Okay, so anyway, I talk all about that, and so I won't beat that to a pulp. I will also mention that because it's unidirectional, and if you look super, super close, I'm not sure if I can blow up this or not. Let me try something. No, of course, it's not going to work. If you look really close, there are little valves in here. And
Page 624 in our book has a really good picture with that on it.
right, here's a picture that appeared in one of the earlier editions of your textbook. I don't think they still have it in 621. So here are the little flap-like components of the valve in a lymph vessel, so that the lymph, as it moves from, say, the bottom toward the top of the diagram, these will open and close depending upon contraction of muscle, which is typically on either side of the lymph vessel. This can help promote lymph flow through this lymph vessel, and also breathing, believe it or not, can help due to pressure changes within certain body cavities, can help promote the flow of that lymph. And then the valve also helps prevent any backflow, if you will, of the lymph. So it's going in one direction, right? Going toward the heart. And eventually that lymph is going to make its way into one of these two major ducts. They're called the right lymphatic and thoracic duct. And the right lymphatic duct basically will take all the lymph from the right hand, shoulder, half of your head, and into your right arm. All of that lymph that passes through those vessels and lymph nodes eventually makes its way into the right subclavian vein. You might have heard of that. You've been studying that for the practical. Okay, so the right subclavian vein is where this lymph goes, and the thoracic duct basically will drain the remaining lighter colored portion here of the body. So the left hand side, torso, legs, and left arm. And that lymph makes its way, excuse me, into the left subclavian vein. But ultimately, the lymph gets back into the blood plasma. And there's basically the flow of the lymph fluid. All right. So this is kind of talking about what I was just mentioning a little bit earlier. What helps to promote this one directional or unidirectional flow of the lymph in the vessels? It's the very same forces that help push blood through veins. So if you can remember these three actions, you'll know how lymph, the forces behind lymph fluid flow, and you'll know the forces behind blood flow in veins. So it's definitely worth learning these three mechanisms, basically. Well, actually, I guess there's four. You know, veins have valves too, maybe. Okay, so this talks a little bit about edema and how that can arise in a person who has some of those axillary lymph nodes, for example, removed, if she's had breast cancer, for example. So here's what a lymph node actually looks like. This is obviously a photograph from probably a cadaver. This red material in the back is muscle, skeletal muscle. Here's a vein of some sort. But here's the lymph node. It has areas called afferent vessels that bring the lymph into one end of the node, and then there's efferent vessels that will lead from the node out. And what did I say is inside the node? What important cells reside inside lymph nodes? Can you hear me? I'm hearing nothing. It's like,
Sorry, it's not lymph fluid, is it? No. It's
well,
certain
there's lymph fluid, but I said what kinds of cells?
cells, right? That's why I stopped. Because
What cells live here?
like T cells,
T
white blood
cells.
cells.
Well, you're gonna have T cells here. There's no red blood cells in here. There's
No, I said
no
white.
RBCs. No.
Okay, I just
You
said
have-
white.
You have T cells and B cells. They're lymphocytes. And what are they there for? They're there to identify what?
Like
Pathogens.
Pathogens.
pathogens,
Yeah.
invaders.
Yeah, exactly. Invaders. And ultimately they want to get rid of those. They want to phagocytize them, or certainly do something that ultimately results in the death of the bacterium, of the virus, of the cancer cell. And a lot of times they do this in a number of different ways. Some of them will phagocytize the bacterium. Others will begin an immune response, which is what the second half of this chapter talks about. All right, so let me go back to the PowerPoint. Here's a picture of a lymph node that's been sectioned. Here are these afferent vessels I was talking about earlier that feed into the node. And here we have a single efferent vessel leading from the node. And these structures that you're seeing here are where we find a lot of T cells. Now, T cell means T lymphocyte. These structures around the outer cortex here contain B cells or B lymphocytes. And also it says macrophages. Do you know what macrophage means? Macro means what?
Big.
Big, right. Phage or phagocytic means
Means to eat.
to eat, yeah. So these are big cells that are hungry. They love to eat. And what they're trying to eat, of course, are the pathogens. B cells and T cells are not really phagocytic, but they play a really important role in the immune system, as again, we'll get into in the second half of this chapter. So they're absolutely critical components of the fighting of the infection, let's say, that could potentially be there or could result. These are just showing some of the locations of lymph nodes in the body. And it's interesting to note that the vast majority are sort of in the center region of the body, from the inguinal area all the way up into the head and neck. And then we have some here in the arm and into the elbow, these supratrochlear nodes. I think it's interesting. There's none in the legs. I don't know why that is. I thought there'd be a few down here, but there's not. No nodes in the legs. Most of them are in the kind of the core center of the body. All right, well, we've talked a little bit about what lymph nodes do. Again, that they are there to filter the lymph and try to identify pathogens and gobble them up, or at least play a role in orchestrating an immune response to the presence of the pathogen and to kill it in some way. So that's a really important function. In addition to the lymph nodes, we also talk about the thymus gland and the spleen as being members of this system as well. The thymus gland is located just superior to the heart and reaches its largest size when you were a kid, when you were an adolescent. And as you get older, this tends to shrink. So somebody who's in their 80s or 90s, this is just almost non-existent. It shrinks away to a very small size relative to the rest of the lungs and the heart. I don't get a sense that its function is diminished, however, as you age at all, because you've heard of the term T cell. Well, it gets the name T cell because even though all lymphocytes develop where do all formed elements develop? Well, the majority of formed elements develop.
Red bone marrow?
Right, from those hemocytoblasts, remember? And they differentiate into a number of different subgroups. So all of these blood cells, including T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes and macrophages and all the 5 kinds, they all develop in the bone marrow, but the T cell matures here in the thymus. That's where it gets the letter T cell, T lymphocyte, from thymus. The spleen, remember looking at the spleen when we did the rat dissection, like the second or third lab of the semester? It was located sort of on the left side here, just underneath the stomach. It looked similar to the liver in terms of its color. Remember, it was like a dark purple red. Yeah, I remember you guys saw it. The spleen is a really important organ in terms of its ability to filter blood of pathogens. So, we talked about how the lymph nodes contain lymphocytes and macrophages to filter the lymph, right? Well, here we've got another organ, the spleen, that is filtering the blood of pathogens. So we have white cells that live here in the spleen that will phagocytize a bacterium, for example, if it flows right next to it through the blood vessels here of the spleen. So we're zooming in, obviously, here of the spleen. Here's a histologic section of the organ. And we can see some of these are called germinal centers, these structures right here. And they're made up of what's called red pulp and white pulp. And these 2 kinds of pulp contain the lymphocytes. The white pulp contains lots of lymphocytes. The red pulp gets the name red because not only does it have lymphocytes and macrophages, but also has red cells in it, which play no role in the immune response at all, right? These guys are just carrying oxygen and to a lesser extent, CO2. Okay, so then we define what it means to be a pathogen. We've already given you some examples of pathogens, right? So I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but there's a little chart here that I found on the internet that I think did a nice job kind of giving you an overview of what our immune system is trying to identify and get rid of. And there's a whole bunch, isn't there? Look through this listing. There's just a ton of different, infectious things out there that we fight off if we are unfortunate enough to acquire them. We'll be adding COVID-2 here to it, I'm sure, soon. COVID-19 virus to this list. Okay, I do spend some time in this chapter also introducing something called a prion, which is an infectious protein. It's not even a cell, it's a molecule. These are fascinating infectious agents. And I don't know if you've ever heard of any of these diseases or not, but maybe you've heard of mad cow disease. It was in the news, back in the 90s. You heard a lot about mad cow disease and the people that got sick when they ate contaminated beef. They ingested the prion and then they got sick. Another type of prion disease is listed here that affects humans, the CJD, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, it's called. This J is pronounced with a Y, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. And there's a little video that is on the PowerPoint here that you can watch. This particular disease you're seeing here is affecting obviously mostly sheep and animals of that sort. I think goats may suffer from scrapie disease too if they get the infectious prion. And the reason it's called scrapie disease is because it causes the animal a lot of irritation, and it scrapes itself against the fence post or whatever, and it wears off its fleece. It's kind of sad, but it kind of drives the animal kind of crazy, and it starts rubbing its fleece off. In addition, we talked about mad cow disease a little bit earlier. If this gets into sheep, like scrapie, or cow, mad cow disease, what this does is it affects the neurological system. It specifically affects the brain. So if you look at a sheep brain with scrapie disease, or a cow brain with mad cow disease, or you look at a human with Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, they all exhibit this spongiform encephalopathy, it's called. Now, bovine spongiform encephalopathy refers to cows, but there's also human spongiform encephalopathy. That's what humans get. But it would look very similar to the cow, where the animal that's infected with the prion would have a smaller size cerebrum. This is the right and left cerebral hemispheres. Now these are frontal sections of the brain. And these structures right here you see, they're called ventricles, not to be confused with heart ventricles. These are brain ventricles, and they contain cerebrospinal fluid, which circulates throughout the entire central nervous system. You'll be learning about that when you get into A&P2. But somebody, be it a cow or a sheep or a human with this encephalopathy due to the prion, would have enlarged ventricles, and also you see these big gaps kind of in between the gyri. These are called sulci, the little depressions, which actually become somewhat large in a brain of an animal that has this prion disease. And so what ends up happening in late stages of the disease is the animal loses all voluntary muscle coordination, and it literally goes mad. It goes crazy. And so animals like cows, who we typically think of as docile, pasture, out in the pasture feeding with butterflies flying around, this idyllic sense of what cows look like. A cow with mad cow disease would not be that gentle animal that you're thinking of. It would be unable to stand. It would be flailing all over the place. It would act somewhat aggressively, perhaps. It's really kind of scary and sad to see animals with this. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, back in, I guess not even the 90s, not that many years ago, several people in the United Kingdom died from having eaten contaminated beef with the prion. Now you might be asking yourself, okay, how did the cow get mad cow disease? Ever think about that? Well, yeah. Do you know
Isn't it
how?
our fault?
I'm sorry?
It's our fault.
It's our
Human-
fault.
Isn't it our fault? Isn't it something that they eat? It's something, yeah, it's human's fault, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I can't
Now-
remember exactly.
Now, if you're a dairy farmer or a beef farmer, what are you going to feed your cows?
Well, you're supposed to feed them like grains and things like that, but weren't they refeeding them cows and stuff? Like,
Sadie's like, what is she talking about?
yeah,
It's so
Yeah.
gross.
it's so nasty. Like, yeah, they were refeeding them cows, correct?
Really? Ew. I read a
So-
book for English a couple of years ago. It was called Omnivore's Dilemma. It was the
Yeah.
most boring book ever. Oh my gosh. Reading in 8th grade as well, don't really want to read about it, but like I remember reading about like the cows, like the farmers like really don't take care of cows like on big farms. Like they feed them like the lowest nutritional grain, and like cows like aren't like growing to like what they're supposed to.
Mhm.
So it was kind of sad. So I remember that.
Yeah.
All the stuff
Well-
they do to them is terrible.
Well, what we're talking about here is some of these big commercial feedlots, like you're describing, Sadie, where the tractor just pulls down the big long wooden feeding trough that's 100 feet long with 100 cows lined up or whatever. It's a big mechanical. It's just a huge operation, right? And so they're feeding them grain that has a filler in it. And the filler is the ground up unused cousins that just got butchered 3 hours before in the big plant behind us. Yeah. So the brain,
It's easy free protein.
it's protein, yeah. The brain tissue, the spinal cords, the bones, the hooves, the fur, all that gets ground up.
The anal sphincter.
Sure, especially the anal sphincter. It gets all ground up and becomes part of filler, which means I don't have to feed my cows as much grain. I can use the filler. That'll make them happy. And I'm saving moolah because I'm spending less money on grain. I got a filler to help me. And the cow eats the prion because the prion's where? Where's the prion go? Spongiform encephalopathy. It's going into the nervous system. Yeah, the brain and spinal cord. And so that's how the cows got the prion. They ate other cows that were infected.
I mean, did it take a couple generations of this for this, like, to sort of like get to the point that it did?
I don't know.
Like, I read about it a long time ago, and it was sort of something like, it was like by the time we realized what was going on, it was so far spread that it was like so hard to get control over.
Yeah, well, that's possible. Just to trace it back to, what happened here, what happened here, what happened here. Oh, now I see what happened. It took a while to do the investigation. Sure, yeah. And by that time, several people had died already, or the meat was out into the system, right? Then they got to recall all this meat and kill all these cows, and oh man, yeah, it was a real dilemma. So anyway, let me go back to the PowerPoint and talk just briefly about the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which affects humans. Now, again, humans can get the prion from eating contaminated beef, as we talked about. There's also an inherited disease that can cause this too, and it's due to the inheritance of a particular gene that will in time, after the person's into their 30s and 40s, it'll cause this spongiform encephalopathy. So this is brain tissue you see here in stained pink. And then these holes like Swiss cheese, these holes are created as a result of the prion, okay, in the brain tissue. And now we talked about how the brain itself is shrunken, remember, in the bigger ventricles and the larger sulci, the spaces between the gyri here. These are called gyri, these kind of convolutions. And this particular hyperlink, which I'm not going to play, is about a 3-minute Mayo Clinic video. If you know anything about the Mayo Clinic, it's one of the most famous research hospitals in the world. And anyway, watch that video. It's actually very, very sad. Talks about a woman who had this disease, who died. The symptoms came on suddenly, and within like 2 weeks, she went from healthy to dead, and they couldn't do a darn thing about it. Yeah, it's just really sad.
If they knew about it beforehand, like if they knew she had the gene, would they be able to? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if they can do the genetic test, then of course, I guess you could tell somebody, well, hey, sorry, you got the gene. You're going to be dead by the time you're 34. I don't know, you know. But here's the story. She could have been tested and at least made the decision not to have children because half of her kids are going to inherit that gene. So here's a story of a family whose mother's gone. The father has these 2 kids he's raising, and there's a 50-50 chance that his 2 kids are going to die the same death that their mother did.
It sounds like Huntington's almost, you know?
Yeah,
It's almost
right,
like
exactly.
you can't reproduce.
Yeah. So if we can develop genetic tests to at least identify these.
We can't hear you, Paige.
You're pulling a John on us, Paige. So anyway, it's just interesting, but it's also very sad. All right, so back to the PowerPoint here.
On a test, I just remember it was on like our second test or something. It was like Krebs disease. It was like Jim Kelly's son.
Krabbe's disease. Yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
What's that disease?
That is a mitochondrial. Gosh, I'm going to have to go back and where was that? In the connective? No. What chapter was that in?
I think it was almost like the first test.
Yes, it was. It was the first test.
Maybe 3.
I thought 3, maybe.
3, yeah.
Because
Talking about Hunter Kelly, and Hunter's body could not make a lysosomal enzyme necessary to break down lipids into chemicals nerve cells can use to produce myelin. So without the enzyme, these lipids accumulated in the cells that make myelin, and so he was unable to have voluntary action because his nerve tissues weren't functioning the way they should. So it was an inability of the lysosome, an organelle in the cell, to make a particular enzyme.
That would kind of have the same effect as like MS on somebody, right? Multiple sclerosis, where the myelin sheath.
Yeah, very, very similar. Yep. Although, most of the time kids don't live he lived to be 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
Now it does say, had he been born today, he would have been tested for Krabbe disease, along with dozens of other, quote, inborn errors of metabolism, with a few drops of blood from his heel shortly after he was born. A cord blood stem cell transfer from a matched donor could have prevented his symptoms. So we talk about cord blood, right? We're getting off topic a little here, but some women who have kids, if they can afford it, they'll save the cord blood because if the kid has leukemia or something like this down the road, they've got some of those stem cells they can use and cure the kid of the disease. But it's terribly expensive to store cord blood. But if you can do that,
All kinds of things, really. I mean,
yeah.
in the future, you might be able to even grow an arm or something,
Well,
stem cells.
stem cells, yeah. as fetal stem cells have a much broader array of cells they can differentiate into. You're right. Yeah. Okay. So we talk a little bit about, mad cow disease and spongiform encephalopathy. And then what the book will do is to get into specific defense mechanisms, actually non-specific and specific. There's two different kind of modes of defense, which I've talked about here in this slide. And this is kind of where we're talking about these are innate, inborn defense systems that you have available to yourself, regardless of how many times you've been exposed to a given pathogen or what pathogen it is you're being exposed to. It doesn't make any difference. You have built-in barriers to protect you all the time. These are natural, genetically innate. That's what that means. Innate means inborn defenses. Can you think of anything that you have at your disposal to protect you from any and all kinds of foreign invaders, no matter how many times you've been exposed to a given bacterium? This is always in place to protect you. Do you know what I'm getting at here?
Like your skin?
Yeah, right. The skin, a very effective barrier, isn't it? And so there's a table here in your book that talks about different innate, non-specific defense mechanisms. Yeah. And so skin is one example. The low pH of the stomach, right? Remember how acidic the stomach is, pH 2? That's very effective in protecting you from foreign invaders. Even your genetics, the fact that you have protection as a Homo sapiens, individual, that's our scientific name, Homo sapiens, means you're protected from other pathogens that could make, say, your dog sick, or your horse sick, or your goat sick, or your goldfish sick. And it's an evolutionary protection, basically.
Would like breast milk be considered an innate one, or would that not be, like the colostrum and stuff? Because that's really not, you're not born with it, but you're getting your mother's.
Yes. So that gets into what the very end of this chapter talks about, and that is different kinds of immunity. We call that passive immunity, where you're acquiring the antibodies from mom's milk in the colostrum, or mom can actually provide those via the placenta to the baby as well.
Right. I always kind of called it like the card catalog of immunities. Like that's what you're passing on to your child,
Yeah, that's true. I guess you could think of it as innate in that sense. Although you have to be a female to be able to produce.
Yeah, it's not like they're there when you're born though. So that's why, you gotta.
Yeah. I don't know that they would include that under the innate category, actually. Okay. Now, this second comment that I'll make up here where it says, but some pathogens, quote, make the leap. Do y'all see that? Do y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what I mean by that?
No.
What this means is that some pathogens that you would ordinarily be protected against because of your genetics, but could cause illness in a pig, let's say, or a bird. Sometimes when humans work very closely with other animals, like they have them as part of their farm, let's say, they're rearing the pork to butcher it to eat, or they're rearing the poultry to butcher it to eat. And a lot of people in the world do that. We don't really appreciate that so much in the United States, but if you go to other countries, a lot of times you have a small family and they've got a pig or a goat or a couple of chickens in the back that they're rearing. They're not doing that for the fun of it. They're doing that probably to get the milk from the cow or the goat, or they're getting the meat from the chickens they're rearing. So what we find is that some of these pathogens that would ordinarily not be an issue to us can become an issue because we work so intimately with them. We're feeding them every day. We're interacting with them all the time. We're in close proximity, and some of these pathogens like viruses can move from the pig to the human, from the bird to the human. And that's how we think COVID-19 may have arisen. there's some hypotheses that have been proposed that say COVID-19 started in bats in Wuhan, China. In this market, they were selling all sorts of game meat. Again, this is a foreign concept to us in the United
Well,
States.
even more than game meat, right? Don't they sell all kinds of, I mean, just like
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, everything you can possibly think of and other things. It's a cultural thing. It's cultural. It's not anything. There's nothing to get creeped out about. It's just the way it is.
Right.
And so this virus, they think, made the jump from one species to another, we being the other. Or how about AIDS? You know where AIDS is thought to have developed? The acquired immune deficiency syndrome. You know about AIDS, don't you?
Yeah, I can't remember.
AIDS,
Gorillas?
close.
Monkeys?
Some primate in Africa, some group of primates in Africa, back in the 1940s or 50s, they think. Here comes my friend.
It's on my end too. I'm right down the hall.
Yeah, my office is shaking. And so now that pathogen, which was restricted to primates or bats, now becomes part of our lives because of that leap that some pathogens.
That's scary though, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it is scary. It's very scary, but it's interesting from an epidemiological.
yeah, oh
point of
yeah,
view,
it's
too.
incredible.
Okay, I'm going to stop here. So try to get into chapter 16 then for Tuesday. How's that?
I had a quick question to ask you after like class, I guess.
Okay. After everybody leaves?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm recording this. Should I stop the recording and then I'll pop back into the room in a minute?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. And my day, are you still there?
Yeah, I will go to the school now.
Okay, I'll see
I
you.
see you in the office.
Yes, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, bye everybody. Thanks. Sorry for being late.
Freya, send me an email, right? And
Yep.
I'll follow up.
Okay, great. Thanks so
Okay.
much. Have a good day,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, you too.